What is going on, everybody? Shwazy here, and in today's video we're going to find out whether the 2023 Mercedes Benz EQE 500 is the best electric crossover on the market today. Okay, to start things off, what exactly is the Mercedes Benz EQE SUV 500? Well, this is the all-electric mid-size crossover in Mercedes lineup. Mercedes actually only has 5 electric vehicles, this one being one of them, and there's only 3 trim levels for this particular model. Now, it shares the exact same name as the EQE sedan, but this one is the SUV. So kind of a weird naming convention that Mercedes has been using, but this essentially shares the exact same wheelbase, the same underpinnings as the EQE sedan, and even the interior is very similar, except this one's just a little bit taller and you get kind of the benefits of having a crossover shape. Now, this is a brand new vehicle for 2023 and it competes with the likes of the BMW iX, the Polestar 3, and to a certain extent the Tesla Model Y, although the price range of this one sits a little bit higher. Now, let's start talking about the design. Starting off with the front end, you've got these LED headlights, and this one in particular has kind of the upgraded headlights. These have a digital light feature, and so what this thing will do is at night, this thing will actually light up different types of effects onto the ground, kind of giving you a light show on the exterior. This one also has the upgraded light bar that extends all the way from the passenger to the driver's side. And as you can see, the front end is very swoopy, very curvy, kind of typical to electric vehicles, but definitely a little bit different than some of the competition. The iX is a little bit more angular than this one, but as you can see here, there is no real front grille because, well, you don't need any type of air cooling of an internal combustion engine because that one doesn't exist. So you've got your little Mercedes logos over here. There's actually probably over 500 little Mercedes logos in the inside and outside, and I'll show you off what that looks like inside. But a big Mercedes emblem over here. You got your 360 camera, and then you've got some nice chrome or brushed aluminum that kind of surrounds this front splitter at the bottom. And let me know your guys' thoughts on the front end design. It definitely looks electric, but it's also very recognizable as a Mercedes. Now, coming over to the side, let's talk about the length of this vehicle. So like I said, this is a mid-size crossover. So this has about the exact same wheelbase as the Mercedes GLE, which is kind of the mid-size crossover in Mercedes lineup. And you're talking about 191.5 inches in terms of length. So pretty standard amongst mid-size crossovers. Now this one, you know, being a more luxurious type of vehicle, you don't have any type of blacked out trim. Everything has this chrome or brushed aluminum. You got the EQE badge. And then this one, since you don't actually have a front trunk like a lot of electric vehicles, you have this little compartment over here to pour your windshield wiper fluid, because that's really the only thing you need to fill up in this car. That is one thing I'm going to complain about. I wish they did offer a front trunk, because this seems like really good storage real estate here that the Tesla does offer, but a lot of the Germans choose not to do that because they say, you know, it's not going to be beneficial or people aren't going to use it. But I think that's kind of a lie. But let me know your thoughts down below. You do have these recessed door handles, so you can lock the vehicle and these will fold in, so that's for better aerodynamics is what they say, and then when you need to, you push on it and the door handle will open. I do like that there is a light located right inside of here, so especially at night it looks really nice, kind of highlights the door handle. I don't love recessed door handles, but even internal combustion engine cars are having those nowadays, so it's kind of the standard in the industry. Now let's talk about these wheels. You've got 255, 45, R20 wheels and tires on this thing. And, you know, as you can see here, this is a 5-spoke design, and 20 inches is pretty large for an electric vehicle, but in order to get some better range and less drag on the wheels, they've got these plastic components here that kind of fill in the spaces in between the spokes so that you have a little bit better efficiency driving down the road. Now, coming back from the wheel, you've got this brushed aluminum / chrome piece that extends to the back, and you've got the exact same tires back here as well. They're 255s. I don't love the fact that this is just a plastic molding around the wheel well. I wish that was body painted color. I think that would look better. Now, while we're back here, I do want to mention one interesting feature of the EQE, and that is the fact that this vehicle has rear wheel steering. So yes, this vehicle can turn its rear wheels upwards of 10 degrees in order to get you a tighter turning radius. So if you're in a parking lot like I am today, where you're trying to avoid some cars, or maybe you're in a very tight spot, that rear wheel steering will actually make a very big difference. I've noticed it firsthand being in tight parking spots. This thing feels more maneuverable than a lot of other much smaller vehicles on the market. So I'm glad more automakers are rolling this out in their vehicles, I'm really glad the EQE has it. Now, another thing to mention is mine being the EQE 500, it automatically comes standard with the Airmatic suspension. And that is the name of the adaptive suspension that Mercedes uses on a lot of its vehicles, and it will actively adjust its air suspension and its ride height depending on what conditions you're in. The Airmatic suspension also offers a feature inside of the cabin where you can raise the vehicle up about an inch, and that way if you take this vehicle off-roading, you got a little bit more ground clearance. But honestly, I don't think you're ever going to take the EQE 500 for off-roading. It's not really meant for that. It's meant to be more of a luxury vehicle than an off-roader. And then wrapping around the rear end of this vehicle, again, a little bit more of that curvy design. Personally, I like the look of the GLE SUV a little bit more. I think it looks a little bit more angular, a little bit more muscular. This to me looks a little bit too soft, too rounded, but I get why they need to do that because aerodynamics is key if you're trying to get the best amount of range. I do love this light bar over here, especially at night. This lighting effect on the taillight looks really good, and even this light bar lights up all the way from the passenger to the driver's side. And then you've got this little windshield wiper and a very small spoiler. I think for best aerodynamics, they had to make it pretty subdued. And then taking a look at the back in general, you've got your chrome badging over here, the EQE 500. You've got the Mercedes logo, which also serves as your backup camera, and you've got 4MATIC over here. Now, of course, the EQE 500 will get into the trim levels, but this is a dual motor setup. Now down here, a little bit more of that plastic cladding. Of course, there's no exhaust pipes because this is fully electric, and that pretty much rounds off the exterior styling. Now, in case you're wondering about the color, this is called Twilight Blue Metallic, and Mercedes uses this color in other models as well, so if you enjoy this, you can get it option on other vehicles. Now, while we're outside, I do want to talk about one quirky, interesting feature that I've activated on this vehicle, and that is the exterior sound effects. So, as I lock and unlock this vehicle, or after I'm done driving and I jump out of this car ready to walk away, this thing will pump sound on the outside. And there's 3 different themes that I can select, but I'll give you just a sneak peek. When I hit the unlock button and then hit the lock button, you may have heard there is like a swooshing kind of electronic sound, but let me change that to a different theme. Okay, now that I changed it from Vivid Flux to Silver Waves, this is what it sounds like. So it's not too different, but it's a slight variation from the Vivid Flux that was shown earlier. Now, you may hear there's like a slight sound going on inside. It's very, very subtle. It may not be able to be captured on camera, but this vehicle is currently making a sound on the outside at very, very low volumes. The horn sound is much louder and it shuts off. But when you unlock it, it's kind of got this welcome greeting. It almost sounds like a spa. But there's one more theme inside. This one is called a Roaring Pulse. It sounds a little bit more aggressive. Again, very similar to the other ones, but it does sound just a little bit different. But it's kind of cool that the EQE 500 offers different sound experiences, making it a little bit more unique and different than some of the other competitors on the market. Now, I've witnessed a similar sound experience in the BMW i4 I reviewed about a year ago, but that one was only an interior sound. This one not only has an interior sound, but it also has an exterior ambiance, is probably the best way to describe it. All right, now since I can't pop the hood and show you the powertrain, I'm just gonna talk about it from the outside. There's 3 different trim levels of the EQE. It starts with the EQE 350 Plus. That one is a single motor, rear-wheel drive setup with a 90.6 kilowatt battery. The power output on that one is about 288 horsepower and 417 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 just about 6.3 seconds, so not bad. In terms of range, that one is the best of the lineup. You've got about 279 miles. Now, the next trim level up from there is the EQE 350 4MATIC, and as the name implies, it's a dual motor setup. But oddly enough, you have a slightly smaller battery. You're looking at 89 kilowatts, and because of that, your range drops down to about 253 miles. But the power figures are a little bit different. Horsepower is the same, 288 ponies, but in terms of torque, you're talking 564 pound-feet of torque, and that thing will do 0 to 60 in, oddly, a very similar time at 6.2 seconds. And that brings us to the 3rd top-of-the-line trim level, which is the EQE 500. Now, this one, as its name implies, has the most amount of power. You're talking 402 horsepower, 633 pound-feet of torque. This thing will do 0 to 60 in just about 4.6 seconds, and boy, does it feel quick. We'll talk about that when I get behind the wheel. Now, in terms of battery, you have the same size as the EQE 350 Plus. It's a 90.6 kilowatt battery. and your range is not too bad considering you have so much power. It's about 269 miles. Now, in terms of the horsepower figures, you may notice that there are some competitors that offer more horsepower, better acceleration. I'm talking BMW iX with the M50 trim level or the Tesla Model Y performance. But one thing to keep in mind is the EQE focuses more on luxury than sportiness. That's why there's not really an AMG version of the EQE at this time. I'm sure that will come out in the future, but this one is just kind of the top of the line, luxurious version of the EQE and not necessarily the one that you're going to take on the Autobahn. Okay, with this vehicle being all electric, we got to talk about the charging infrastructure. Now, this vehicle can use any of the Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo. I mean, there's plenty of different companies out there. This vehicle can use any of those charging stations. Now, one thing I do want to mention is with every purchase of a new electric Mercedes, Mercedes offers 2 years of complimentary charging of up to 30 minutes at any DC fast charger with Electrify America. So that's a nice incentive for those of you that are maybe on the fence of buying an electric vehicle. Now, in terms of charging this vehicle, Mercedes says it's actually pretty easy. All you need to do is have a Mercedes Me app where you have all your payment information. And once you plug into like a ChargePoint or Electrify America station, this vehicle will have what they call a digital handshake between the vehicle and the charging station, and it will automatically start charging and know which credit cards it can charge for the amount of time that you're at the station. So that makes it a little bit more similar to like a Tesla. But in terms of personal experience, I can't necessarily comment on that as I don't have the Mercedes Me app. So anybody who has one of these and has used the application, let us know how that has worked down in the comments below, because I'm sure people will be wondering if it's as easy as just plug and play or if it takes a few extra steps to get it to work. Now, every single EQE comes with a 9.6 kilowatt onboard charger, and Mercedes says this vehicle can accept upwards of 170 kilowatt DC fast charging, which will allow this vehicle to go from 10 to 80% range in just about 32 minutes. Now, finding a charging station is really easy to do with the MBUX system inside of the car. So all you do is click one button on the screen and it will show you all of the local charging stations. You can even filter by how fast the charging station can accommodate. And then you can also look at the details like the weather at the location, how many different charging stations are at that specific location. You can look at photos of where you're going to park. You can even find out how busy that station is at any given time throughout the day. It'll also tell you whether it's compatible with your Mercedes Me app that I was surprised to see. So really a lot of useful information baked inside of the MBUX software that's very helpful if you're searching for a charging station, especially on a road trip. Now, the question you may ask is how accurate is this system to reality? So if you pull up to a specific charging station, is it really going to match what it's telling you on the screen? That's going to take a lot of trial and error to really determine. But for the most part, if that's one of your anxieties and fears about buying an electric vehicle, the Mercedes MBUX system makes it a lot easier. Okay, not that I would recommend towing in an electric vehicle, but in case you need to, the EQE 500 can tow up to 3,500 pounds, which is pretty decent. Okay, now let's jump inside of the vehicle and talk about the interior. And similar to all Mercedes products, I love the interior even more than the exterior. Mercedes just knows how to design a beautiful interior cabin. Now, let's talk about the color. This is, I'm gonna butcher the name, called Biscaya Blue with a Neva Gray and a wood grain dash. So this is a white blue leather interior, and personally, I wouldn't pick this because it's just gonna get very dirty. I mean, even the floor mat area, you've got blue floor mats and then white carpeting all around it. That just sounds like a mess, especially in the wintertime. But it is a beautiful interior. I do like the white. Starting off with the door panel, really soft touch material. You've got this copper stitching and this copper aluminum trim that extends all the way across the dashboard onto the passenger side. It really has kind of like this spaceship-like interior. It looks really beautiful. And then you've got your typical Mercedes aluminum buttons and haptic feedback controls for your seat controls. And then moving below that, you've got kind of this floating stack for your window switches. And the window switches feel very nice with their aluminum touches. In front of that section is your 15-speaker Burmester sound system. And this is standard on all EQE 500s. It's got what Mercedes calls a 3D sound, and it does sound very good. I'm not an audiophile, but I do really like how it's pumped throughout the entire cabin. Now below that, you got a little storage compartment with your button to open up the lift gate. Now moving inside, you got this beautiful wood grain dash that extends pretty much from the driver's side door panel to the passenger side. And it's got about 240 different little Mercedes logos integrated into the wood. And this isn't just painted on. No, this is real aluminum integrated inside of the wood on this entire panel. So really nice attention to detail. Now moving above this wood grain dash, you've got this nice leather wrapped dashboard, very soft touch, a little bit more of that copper stitching. Looks really beautiful. And then moving to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you've got this nice aluminum air vent, which almost looks like an airplane turbine. And it's got some ambient lighting in it. Just really, really nice to touch. Got some nice resistance to it. I didn't think I would focus so much time on an air vent, but it is gorgeous. Moving inwards, you've got a standard 12.3-inch instrument gauge cluster display. It's all digital, and it's very similar to all other Mercedes products. It's very robust, lots of functionality here. You can pull up a full screen navigation system, or you can pick your standard gauges and have the navigation just in the little center area. So very advanced, very robust functionality on the instrument gauge cluster display. Now let's talk about the steering wheel. It's nice leather wrapped. Again, white leather, not something I would personally choose, but it does look beautiful. Now on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you have this haptic feedback control where depending on where your finger is placed, this vehicle will know exactly what function you want to activate. And then you just push on this entire panel and it will activate the feature. So it's pretty cool. I've shown this on previous Mercedes products as well. And that is how you go through the various themes on your instrument gauge cluster display. Now below that, on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you got your adaptive cruise control functionality. And this has very advanced safety tech. You've got adaptive cruise control with stop and go technology. You've got blind spot monitoring, evasive steering assist. Some of the most advanced safety tech on the industry today, you can either get standard or equipped on this vehicle. On the right-hand side of the steering wheel, that's the very similar set of haptic feedback controls, but that's how you control the infotainment screen, which we'll talk about in just a second. Below that, you have your audio controls and then just your phone settings and your voice activation. Now, behind the steering wheel, you have two paddle shifters, and these are used to increase or decrease your regen braking. And we'll talk about that when we get behind the wheel to drive it. And then you've got your windshield wiper controls. And then on the right-hand side is your stock to change it from parking, reverse, neutral to drive. Moving towards the center, this is where you have your standard 12.8-inch OLED touchscreen display. Now, Mercedes doesn't offer the Hyper screen, which is like a 56-inch screen on the EQE. That's reserved for the EQS, but this is plenty, and it looks and feels very, very good and very easy to use. If you guys have ever used MBUX in any other Mercedes, this is going to be very familiar. You've got this kind of haptic feedback control. I call it a 3D touch, where as you select something, it will vibrate the screen, letting you know you've selected a specific function. So I like that functionality. You also have wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, and it's very, very robust. Probably the best application of wireless Android Auto I've experienced to date, because it doesn't take over the entire software. You can simply activate it by hitting the button on the top left of the screen, and that way you can go through your Waze functionality, your music, and then when you're tired of using Android Auto, you can simply hit the home button and it will reactivate the MBUX software. So the two softwares speak very easily, whereas other cars, you know, the Android Auto just takes over, and I honestly don't like it to take over all of the functionality of the infotainment screen. I do want to talk about a couple menus located within this 12.8-inch display. For one, you have your Eco menu, or your EQ menu is how Mercedes calls it. And in this menu is where you have various different settings for your charging and range optimization. There's a menu in here where you can deactivate or restrict certain functions within the car that will boost your range overall. So for example, if you're going on a road trip and you want to make as few stops as possible, then you can restrict your climate control functionality, and that way you're going to get, for example, 14 extra miles of range. Or I can improve by hitting the eco driving functions, and that will give me an additional 12 miles. So upwards of 29 miles can be added if I click this one button, which will make it a little bit less comfortable inside, but allow me to go a longer distance. Now, within this Eco menu, you can also set a maximum charging percentage. Mercedes recommends about 80% to ensure your battery lasts a little bit longer. And then you can also set different schedules. So if you're, for example, charging at home, but you want it to shut off after 3 a.m., you can do that within the software here. And that way it also conserves your battery. Now, you can also take a look at your consumption over time and how efficient you are driving. Now, let's talk about climate control. You don't have any physical buttons, which is unfortunate. But at the bottom of the touchscreen display, you have this permanent section where you can increase, decrease the temperature, the fan speed. That is always stationary no matter what screen you're on, even if you're in Android Auto. So I do like that they permanently have climate control functions, so you don't have to consistently hunt around for that submenu. But there's also a quick access button for your climate menu where you can control where the fan is blowing the air. Within that menu, you can also take a look at the air quality, because this vehicle will purify the outside air as it goes into the cabin, making sure that it removes all of the allergens and the dust that's going on outside. And then in that menu, you can also schedule the pre-entry climate control, where if you're consistently getting in this vehicle at 7 a.m., this vehicle will be able to automatically either increase or decrease the temperature to your liking before you enter into the vehicle. Now, there's a couple more features I want to talk about. Within the comfort menu, there's something called Seat Kinetics, where if you activate it, this car will make micro adjustments and changes to the seat as you're driving, so that on long road trips, you don't feel as fatigued or tired at the end of it, because you kind of have been continually moving throughout the process. It's kind of an interesting concept. I'm not really sure if it's really effective on long road trips, but it is cool that they've kind of thought about that ahead of time. You can also adjust various different settings for your heated seats, which are standard on the EQE 500, but if you want ventilated seats, you're gonna have to pay for that option. But you can adjust from your seat back to your seat cushion to wherever you want the heat to be pointed towards, that's where you can adjust. And then I want to move to the ambient lighting, because this has some of the most beautiful ambient lighting I've seen in any vehicle. You've got this beautiful light strip that goes all the way across from the driver to the passenger side. There's even ambient lighting on the seat cushion, which is insane. And there's a dozen different types of different themes that you can choose to mix and match different colors. There's even a theme that you can select where as you're accelerating or decelerating, this car will have different colors to the ambient lighting. And of course, it doesn't have any type of strobe light effect, and you can decrease the brightness, but it is just kind of a cool ambiance to the interior. But if you want one solid color, there's 64 different colors that you can choose from on the interior. I also like the fact that you have different lighting effects. So as you change the temperature up, this thing will flash red on the side that you're increasing the temperature, and then as you decrease it, it'll flash blue. So lots of different effects on the interior. When you get inside of the car and turn it on, it'll have this light strip that goes all the way across, back and forth. It's kind of got a personality to it, and I like that. It makes it a little bit different than just your standard ambient lighting. Now, you've also got an off-road mode, which personally, I don't know why you would use this vehicle off-road. It doesn't have that much ground clearance, and even with the aromatic suspension raising it up about an inch, I still wouldn't recommend taking this car off-road, but it'll show you your pitch and angle and what elevation you're at, what direction you're headed, and then you even have a downhill cruise control. Also, this vehicle has a very robust 360-degree camera. Not only will it give you that 3D view from the outside as if a drone is flying on around, but you can also see what's going on underneath the vehicle. This car uses some fancy software to essentially take a photo of what's going on in front, and as you pull forward, it will move that image underneath the car. So if you're rock crawling for whatever reason in the EQE, you can see exactly where that rock is in relation to the vehicle. So pretty advanced tech there. But again, I wouldn't recommend using it in the EQE. Now, you can also activate and deactivate your creep functionality in this car. And no, I don't mean this will stalk your ex-girlfriend. What I mean by is if you let go of the accelerator, if you want this car to simulate an internal combustion engine, you can turn on the creep functionality and this thing will slowly move forward. But you can also shut that off. So when you let go of the accelerator, it's going to remain at a standstill. So depends on what you're used to and what you prefer, but you can shut that feature on and off. Now, there's a ton more features baked into the software that I'm just not going to have time to talk about, but one thing I do want to mention that I've seen on other Mercedes is you can control everything with your voice. So here's an example of that. Hey Mercedes.
How may I help you?
I'm feeling cold.
I'm increasing the temperature to 64 degrees.
So it increased the temperature for me, and then you can actually utilize this as like your home device. So you can even ask it like, what year was Mozart born? And it will tell you. I've tested that before, and it actually told me the year. So very robust technology here. I really like the MBUX software. It's better than some of the competition in this similar price point. Now, below this giant screen is another set of haptic feedback controls for your different drive modes. You can quickly access your 360 camera, your energy efficiency modes. You can even access your car settings by pushing a button. And then there is a fingerprint reader here as well. So if you want to pre-program certain memory functions, certain favorites, you can reactivate those favorites when you get into the vehicle by simply touching your finger on there, and it will automatically adjust everything to your preferences. That's a pretty cool feature. You also have a button to turn off the power, and then there's no physical button here for your volume. You have this slider function, or you can push the plus and minus button to adjust the volume. It does take a little bit getting used to, so that is unfortunate, but it works pretty well in my experience. Now, one complaint I do have about this infotainment screen is, although it looks amazing, it is definitely a fingerprint trap. And so after, a few days of using the system, you're gonna wanna keep a microfiber towel inside of your ARM console so that you can wipe it down to keep it clean. Now, moving below this large infotainment screen is this large piano black plastic. I don't love it, but it fits with the theme of the interior, especially since there's so much wood already. Now, by opening up this flap, you have this large storage compartment, which currently has 2 cup holders that you can store away, but you can remove the entire cup holder unit entirely, and that way it opens up a much larger storage compartment that you can close up by just closing the flap. Now, in front of that storage compartment, you've got a wireless charging pad, which is standard as well. Now, it doesn't work very fast, so if you need a fast charging wireless charger, I wouldn't recommend using the one in the EQE, but at least it does have one and it does come standard. You've got 2 USB ports there as well, and then if your phone has NFC capability, you can put it on here and it will automatically connect with the infotainment screen. Moving below that, you've got this soft ARM console. It feels pretty good to rest your elbow, and then opening it up, it's a very large compartment. It's very deep, so you can easily store a bunch of different valuables in there. Now, let's briefly talk about the seats, because they are nice leather wrapped. You do have thigh bolstering here for the passenger and driver side, and then I do like that the headrest is adjustable to various different settings. So not only can it go up, down, but it can go forwards, backwards, so that, depending on what person you are and whether you like the headrest kind of pushing up against you or backwards, you can adjust it to your preference. Now, moving upwards, unfortunately, I don't see any type of digital rear view mirror as an option on the EQE, which is kind of unfortunate because a lot of vehicles are integrating that. And then above you have this nice piano black stack that has a ambient lighting around it. It kind of reminiscent of an airplane for me. And then you've got your buttons for your SOS and your lighting controls above you. Now, you've got this sliding panel where you can swipe and it will open up your panoramic sunroof, which is also a standard feature on all EQE 500s. And then you can open up the sunroof by swiping again after the sunshade has opened. But you can also swipe it backwards and it will shut the sunshade as well. So it's kind of cool that you have this touch sensitive slider above you to open and close the panoramic sunroof. Now, moving into the second row, there's really not that much to report back there. The door panel has the same nice use of materials, the blue and the white leather, the aluminum touches on the door handle, and then you've got a little storage compartment below you for like a cup holder. Now, moving towards the seats, they are really nice looking, but they're not as comfortable in my personal opinion as the front seats. But luckily, you have tons of legroom back there. It's actually more than your typical mid-size crossover. You're looking about 40.6 inches of second row legroom, and headroom is also more than your typical crossover. You got 39.4 inches of headroom, so plenty of space back there. I fit just fine. Tons of legroom, easy to stretch out. There's no center hump because there's no transmission tunnel, and so you could actually easily fit 3 people back there without having to kind of cramp your leg space. Now, behind the center ARM console, you've got 2 air vents. You can get 4-zone climate control, but you have to pick a higher trim level, and I don't see any option for rear heated seats, which is kind of disappointing for a vehicle at this price point. Below the air vents, you got 2 USB-C ports, but unfortunately, I don't see any type of household power outlet. Now, luckily, you do have a center ARM console in the back with 2 cup holders, but not much exciting stuff going on in the second row. Moving into the trunk area, you do have a power lift gate that you can activate by simply pushing on the Mercedes emblem on the trunk, and that will open up about 14 cubic feet of space behind the second row. Definitely not a class leader. It's probably one of the least in this segment, but it actually looks bigger than the numbers say. I could probably easily fit a couple, large paper towel rolls, some suitcases, and be just fine, but it's not the largest. If you need more space, you're gonna wanna opt for some of the competition or a bigger vehicle like the EQS. Now, you can fold down the second row seats and you can get upwards of 55 cubic feet of space, which is pretty decent. But then in terms of the trunk area, there's not that much exciting stuff back there either. You've got just your 12-volt cigarette style power outlet. You've got some hooks for your groceries. And then on the trunk floor, you've got a bag that houses your charging cable. And then below the trunk, you actually have a pretty decent sized storage compartment where you have your fix-a-flat kit, and then you can hide some valuables down there out of plain sight, and you could easily actually put your charging cables in there as well. Okay, now let's talk about the pricing. The EQE 350 Plus, which is the entry-level trim, that starts about $77,900. Oddly enough, if you want to get the 4MATIC version of the 350, it's going to cost the exact same price. Now, this one is the EQE 500. Being the top of the line, this starts around $89,500. Now, my particular version with the exclusive trim level, This one is around $98,040, so almost $100,000. And if you choose the Pinnacle version, you can easily get over $100,000. So this is definitely not a cheap vehicle, and for that reason I say it doesn't really necessarily compare with the Tesla Model Y, because this is definitely a more expensive vehicle than that, but it is similarly priced to the Polestar 3 and the BMW iX. Now, although the EQE 500 comes at a pretty hefty price tag, there are quite a bit of standard features. First off, you get these LED headlamps with high beam assist. You get these beautiful LED taillights in the back. You get this somewhat more aggressive AMG line exterior with this AMG 5-spoke wheels. The standard EQE also comes with that exterior sound generator, which kind of amplifies for pedestrian safety. And you've got your typical adaptive cruise control. Now, if you upgrade to the exclusive trim level, like the vehicle behind me, you got that active ambient lighting on the inside, which gives you kind of visual effects as you change the temperature or as you're accelerating. It'll also give you an augmented reality navigation system, but probably the biggest feature is some more advanced safety tech. So with the exclusive trim, you've got the adaptive cruise control with some lane changing functionality. So this thing will actually change lanes for you on the freeway when it feels like it's necessary. What I mean by that is, let's say you set your speed limit to 70 miles per hour, but the vehicle in front of you is only going 60. Well, this vehicle, if it sees that there's some opening on the left-hand side, will actively change lanes for you and then change back into the right lane to get out of the way of traffic. So pretty advanced safety features here, kind of giving you Skynet vibes, but overall it's pretty cool. It also has active blind spot assist so that you don't crash into somebody in your blind spot. Now, the top of the line Pinnacle trim gets you 4-zone climate control, you got the air fragrance system on the inside, and you get the digital lights as standard. My particular trim level has those as an option, but you'd get those as standard if you got the Pinnacle trim level. Okay, now getting behind the wheel of the Mercedes EQE. First off, I wanted to show you the Mercedes key. This is a little bit different than the GLE I recently reviewed, but feels pretty good in the hands. There's just a couple buttons here: lock, unlock, and open up your lift gate. Now, getting behind the wheel, similar to other internal combustion engine cars, there is a physical start-stop button, but if you put this vehicle in park and walk away, it will automatically turn off after a few minutes. Okay, now one of the first immediate reactions and things that I noticed sitting in this car for the first time is just how luxurious this vehicle is. And I know that goes without saying because this is a Mercedes. Of course it's going to be luxurious, but you know, you sit in a lot of different electric vehicles and you kind of expect them all to feel the same at the end of the day, but this one does feel a little bit different. It feels like a luxury car, and it feels better than a Tesla Model Y. And personally, I like Tesla vehicles. I have nothing against them, but this feels a cut above, and it should, because the price point of this vehicle is much higher. I mean, this one, the vehicle we're sitting in today, is $98,000. And so if it wasn't luxurious, then nobody would buy it, or nobody should buy it, I should say. But the interior cabin is incredibly quiet. And, you know, that's common amongst a lot of electric vehicles because there's no engine under the hood. But this one's like especially quiet. There's definitely additional sound deadening. You barely hear any wind noise. Here I am going 40 miles an hour. And I could probably whisper to you and you'd still hear what I'm saying. And in terms of ride quality, this is a very comfortable vehicle to drive in. Now, keep in mind, this is sitting on 20-inch wheels. So no matter how much air suspension you have, you're still gonna have a little bit more rough ride quality. But even considering that, this thing just soaks up bumps extremely well. It almost floats over speed bumps and parking entrances. Probably one of the most comfortable all-electric crossovers I've driven. Now, there's not very many out there, but that just kind of goes to show that it is a very comfortable ride. Now, as we came to a stop here, I do want to talk about the regen braking in this vehicle. There's 4 different levels. So you've got the strong recuperation, normal, you can turn it off entirely, or there's something called intelligent. And honestly, I'm not quite sure how that works. I think it depends on what battery level you're at, whether you're going uphill, downhill, what speed you're going at. I've kept it in strong the entire time, and it's worked pretty well. I can do the one-pedal driving. I've kind of gotten more used to that as I drive more electric vehicles. And I can't say it's a super aggressive regen braking. Like here I am accelerating. I'm about to let off the... There you go. I just let off the accelerator. it doesn't jerk you super far forward. You know, like the Rivian R1T I reviewed last year, that one had a much more aggressive regen braking. This one isn't that aggressive. Now, I've mostly been driving in the regular comfort mode. The sport mode, you do notice a little bit of a difference in the accelerator. Interestingly enough, the mode where I notice the biggest difference is in eco mode. And in fact, when I get into that mode, I'll hear a little clicking sound coming from the accelerator, and it adds quite a bit of resistance onto my foot as I'm laying on the accelerator. And obviously it's supposed to give you the best amount of range, but I don't know if I would use it that often unless maybe I'm going on a road trip and trying to maximize my efficiency. Now, of course, if you slam on the accelerator, this thing will accelerate super quick. It doesn't, you know, have any type of dangerous side effects, but you definitely notice a little bit more of that weight on the gas pedal because you're in eco mode. Now, of course, this wouldn't be an electric car review if I didn't show off the acceleration, so I'm going to put it in sport mode just for this segment, and we're about to get on a freeway on-ramp. Let's see how this thing accelerates, so why don't you buckle up. That is pretty fun. Now, it's not an insane, ungodly amount of power, right? But it is very quick. I mean, this is plenty quick for anybody who's driving in, you know, day-to-day traffic, trying to merge onto the freeway. This isn't a race car, but this is very quick. You can definitely, you know, hit your head against the headrest as you're accelerating. But anybody who's driven an electric car will probably relate. 0 to 60, 4.6 seconds. You got 402 horsepower, 633 pound-feet of torque. Very, very quick. Now, to sum up this vehicle overall and its driving experience, this just feels like a very opulent, luxurious car. Honestly, driving home from work, sitting in this car, calms me down. It is surprising how much of a visceral experience it is just hearing some of the sounds inside the car, how quiet the cabin is, how it accelerates, how it decelerates with that regen braking. It really does feel like a seamless process, and it's a very relaxing vehicle to drive in. Now, you may be wondering about reliability, and honestly, it's just too new to rate. This is the first model year of the vehicle, so only time will tell how reliable the EQE is. Now, from the factory, Mercedes offers a 4-year, 50,000 mile limited bumper-to-bumper warranty, and in terms of the battery, it's pretty impressive. You got a 10-year, 155,000 mile warranty on the battery. So that is probably some of the best in the industry that you can get. Also, on the window sticker of this vehicle, Mercedes offers a 2-year, 20,000 mile complimentary maintenance package for this vehicle, which is something I've never seen Mercedes offer on any other vehicle. That probably has to do with the fact that there's really not that much maintenance on an electric vehicle in the first 2 years. Now, in terms of resale value, again, something that just a little bit too early to tell. I imagine this is going to be very similar to some of the other German competitors. Okay, so to sum up this video, what are my overall thoughts on the EQE 500? And to answer the question, is this the best electric crossover on the market today? Well, that's a tough question to answer. Honestly, this is a very expensive vehicle, and there's no denying that, and so it's probably out of reach for the majority of people in the market for an electric car. That said, if you look at some of the competition like the Polestar 3 and the BMW iX, those share a very similar price point and similar performance, although some of them do offer higher trim levels with more power. I don't necessarily compare this with like the Tesla Model Y or the Cadillac Lyriq because this is a more expensive vehicle and it carries that brand cachet that some of the other competition doesn't. Also, I think the interior of this vehicle is definitely nicer than the Cadillac Lyriq and the Tesla Model Y. I like those vehicles a lot, but this one does feel a little bit more high-end. Now, I think the closest competitor to this is the BMW iX, and that interior is also very nice, very futuristic and modern. This one takes a little bit of a different approach. This is more traditional, more typical Mercedes, very posh, luxurious, and honestly, I kind of prefer the interior of this than the iX just because it has that more traditional luxury flavor to it. But honestly, it's up to you. Both of those are very good vehicles. So personally, I'd recommend test driving one, see how it drives, see if you like the sound experience, because there are some unique features here that I haven't seen in the competition, like the digital light effects, like the sound experience on the outside of the vehicle. It's those little things that separate cars like this from some of the bland electric vehicles on the market. But let me know your thoughts on the EQE 500. Would you purchase this over some of the competition? And what are things that you wish were a little bit better in this particular vehicle? If you all enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Also check me out on all the social media at Schwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.